That's where our text will be coming from this morning. And as I told in Bible class this morning, I have a little bit more of an update this time than what I had last time, just from everything that has been going on here lately. One of which, I guess one of the biggest ones, being that I'm engaged and I am also a father. I know you're really surprised right now. It's a puppy, don't worry. The manner that I chose to propose was a puppy because I wasn't for sure if she'd say yes to me, but I knew she would say yes to a puppy. So that's how I chose to do that one. And graduating in May, looking forward to that, but also a little bit of uncertainty there, I guess, being an adult going into the real world. But I know that as soon as I graduate, I'm going to be moving to Lafayette, Tennessee, where at the Lafayette Church of Christ, I have accepted the position as the youth and family minister there. I'm very, very excited to do that. Really looking forward to being with those people and working with that congregation. And again, I just wanted to give a huge thank you to you for helping me along the way. As I was telling the Bible class this morning, as things wind down and as school kind of wraps up, I begin to look back over everything that has been the last 3 years that have gone by increasingly fast. Each year they've gotten faster. And looking back over that, I see God's hand in a lot of it and on all of it, and I see the help that He has provided, and He's done that and He's worked that through you. So I want to give another big thank you for that. I left the remote. Is there any way that you can click for me? Or you're the best, Tim. Thank you. The lesson this morning is going to come from Luke chapter 1, starting in verse 5 and going to verse 25. Luke chapter 1. And before we get there and before we read it, I want you to think for a moment. And we're going to be talking about struggles. And not just a single struggle, not just one that you're thinking of, but like the struggle that you have in your life. And take a few seconds, a few moments, and dive into the closet, dive into the memory. Maybe it's whatever. Thanks. I'm sorry. College irresponsibility. If you take a few seconds and take a few moments and dive into your past, dive into whatever it is that you may have been trying to cover up or throw in the closet or throw under the rug, and whatever it is that may stand between you and God this morning. And it could be a list of things. It could be a slew of maybe an event that happened in your life that you're just not for sure why God would allow that to happen to you, or a person that passed that you don't understand how it could work out the way that it did, or maybe a job loss that happened, or maybe it's some kind of question that you have in your faith that you just can't get past, and it's standing between where your faith is right now and maybe where you know your faith should be. Whatever that struggle is, take a few seconds and identify it. And I know that can be difficult, because we're not just talking about a struggle, we're talking about the struggle. The struggle that you have that stands out in your faith among all the rest. And it's kind of like when I remember moving from Fair Dealing to Benton, the big city of Benton, the metropolis that it is. And one thing that was different for me that very first night, I'll never forget it, was that there are street lights in Benton. So trying to go to sleep when it's not complete darkness, when you have a street light glaring you in the face, was something that I can still remember the picture now. But over time, what happened? I got used to it. It's the process of habituation is what it's called. It's kind of like when people live in a house that's right by an airport. You'll walk in and it'll feel like your eardrums are peeling off as an airplane goes over, and they don't even notice it because they've gotten used to it. And in the exact same way, that's what we do with our struggles. That's what we do with our problems, because I don't know about you, but I don't want to deal with them. I don't want to bring them out and wrestle with them and work through them with God. It's much easier for me to take it and just push it behind me and pretend like it's not there. And even though it's standing right there, here I am. We do that. And so taking that out and taking a few minutes to pull it out and work with it here for a minute this morning, I think that if we dig deeper into ourselves, each and every one of us are going to find one. And so with that in mind, let's go to the text in Luke chapter 1, starting in verse 5 and going to verse 10. It reads this. Well, if I can get there. It reads this. In the days of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah of the division of Abijah, and he had a wife from the daughters of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. And they were both righteous before God, walking blamelessly in all the commandments and statutes of the Lord, but they had no children, because Elizabeth was barren, and both were advanced in years. And while he was serving as priest before God, when his division was on duty, according to the custom of the priesthood, he was chosen by Lot to enter the temple of the Lord and burn incense. And the whole multitude of the people were praying outside at the hour of incense. Let me ask you this. What is the largest moment that you can think of in your career? The biggest pinnacle, everything has built up to this moment. What you want to do with your life, what you want to accomplish in life, like that star-spangled moment that you have in lights, what is that? And because the reason that I ask is whenever you culminate in your mind and see that moment and see you standing there, that's where Zechariah is right now. And that's what Zechariah is experiencing in this moment. Because what's happened is that for a priest, they have this selection process of who's going to go into the temple and who is going to burn this incense before God. And it works out, and the way that they have it organized is it only happens once. For any given priest. I think it said there's 200 some odd, and it's only a once-in-a-lifetime event. Some don't even get to do it. So for Zechariah, when he's right here in this moment about to go in and do this, this is it. This is the pinnacle of the career. This is everything that he had lived for, everything that he had built up to. This wasn't just another thing on the to-do list that you have to cross off as a priest. And when we see that this was his time to shine, it's all amplified. It's amplified by the information that we read about him and his wife in verses 6 and 7. They were both barren. And you might think to yourself, well, there's a lot of people in the Bible that were barren. That's really not that big of a deal. That's one way to look at it. Another is this. In their society and in their culture, what Zechariah and Elizabeth lived through on a daily basis was everyone looked at them and thought because they were barren, they must have done something wrong. Because they were barren, that means that there was some kind of sin in their life that God was punishing them for, and that's why they were barren. And so even though when we look at verse 6, it tells us how righteous they were, how blameless they were, that they walked in the sight of God, they followed after his commandments, but yet, he was even a priest, yet they were second rate. Because they were barren and everyone assumed that meant that there was some kind of sin present in their life. And so you have all of this going through his head, all of that added extra pressure, because everyone's standing outside, we read, standing outside of the temple waiting for, as soon as he offers this incense, he's going to go out and offer a blessing for all the people and let them know what he had just done. A lot of pressure on Zechariah right now. Biggest moment in his career, and he lived an entire life of people looking down on him and his wife for their barrenness, and it all comes to this. It all gets to this moment. And what do we read happens in verses 11 through 17? Verse 11 says this. And there appeared to him an angel of the Lord standing on the right side of the altar of incense. And Zechariah was troubled when he saw him, and fear fell upon him. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah. For your prayer has been heard, and your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you shall call his name John, and you will have joy and gladness, and many will rejoice at his birth. And for he will be great before the Lord, and he must not drink strong wine or strong drink, and he will be filled with the Holy Spirit, even from his mother's womb. And he will turn many to the children of Israel and to the Lord their God." Here's the emphasis, verse 17. "And he'll go before him in the spirit and the power of Elijah to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and the disobedient to the wisdom and the just, to make ready for the Lord a people prepared." Everything that Zechariah had built up in his mind of this is my big moment just got put on its head and spun by God. Because, okay, you have expectations. When you go through engagement, you read that book, His Needs, Her Needs. A lot of it's about expectations. We have expectations of how things are going to go in our life, how things are going to go in our relationships. Zechariah had it laid out in his head So much pressure building up to this. You know moments like this where you have it laid out in your head of this is how it's going to go. Like this is how I see it happening. And the whole time, Zechariah is planning through this in his head of how it's going to go, and God's just sitting back, kind of snickering to himself a little bit, knowing that that's not it at all. The way that God has planned for Zechariah to serve him is so much bigger than what Zechariah had thought. It was so much greater. Because in Zechariah's mind, he saw this moment of going in and burning this incense and being the priest that he was supposed to be and going out and offering this blessing and then everybody going home happy. But what God saw was something so much greater than that. He said, no, it's not just going to be you offering incense, Zechariah. You're going to be the father of John the Baptist, the one that is going to prepare the way and prepare the people of Israel for my son, Jesus. And all of this happens just in a matter of moments. And all of it happens in just a matter of seconds. And we wonder to ourselves how we would handle something like that. And I mean, we see that Zechariah, at first, he's kind of apprehensive about it, the same way that Abraham and Sarah were in Genesis chapter 18. The same way that a lot of people are apprehensive. Jonah, when God calls on people, half of the prophets, they take a minute and they're not sure about this. They're like, God, are you sure that I'm the person that you meant to come to right now? Yes, he's sure. He says, yes, I'm sure. And you even read further down in Luke chapter 1 and see that Zechariah was made mute because of how apprehensive, how cautious he was about God's plan in his life. And all of this comes to the point to be made this morning. When you look at your struggle, and when we look at our struggle, whatever that is, whatever that may be, and we compare ourselves to the life of Zechariah, we look and we see that there is something very unique about how God chose to use Zechariah. It doesn't just stop at saying that God has so much bigger plans for you, Zechariah, than what you had. The plans that God had for Zechariah involved what? A son. And what did we find out about Elizabeth and Zechariah back in verses 7, 8? That they were barren. And so what we see and what we take away from the story of Zechariah is that God took their greatest struggle. God took the thing that we see in verse 13 they prayed about, the thing that kept them up at night, the thing that almost stood between them and their relationship with God because they don't understand, why is this happening to me? God took that very thing, and that was what he chose to use as their avenue to serve him. How amazing is that? The thing that they wrestled with most and the thing that they struggled with most. And what we would look at and say is their biggest stumbling block in life, that's what God chose and that's what God used to turn them into his servants, to show them how they could be used for him and in his kingdom. That's amazing. If we go back to the very beginning, and we look at our struggle, and we think about it for just a moment, we see that within that struggle is John the Baptist waiting. Now, obviously, metaphorically, John the Baptist is not actually waiting there, but God being willing and ready to use that struggle to do great and amazing things, greater than we ever imagined, greater than Zechariah ever imagined. He's waiting, and he's there, and he's ready, but we have to be equally ready to bring out that struggle and take it and turn it over to him. And so you might be asking, the question that I always ask in every lesson is how? Exactly how do I do that? Okay, I've gotten to this point in the sermon. I've thought about my struggle. It's come to light. It's all coming together. I see that God He can use that and do great things with it. Okay, how? What do I do from here? What's the action part of all of this, the application part of all of this? I completely understand. And I asked the exact same question. The first one is going to be found in verse 13, where he says, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah, for your prayer has been heard." So the first thing that we see is, think about the shame, the honor-shame culture that they had, that Zechariah and Elizabeth went through on a daily basis for being barren. What most of us would do, what I would do, is I would take that and try to hide it from as many people as possible. and try to push it as far back into the closet as I can. But what they did is they brought it out and they brought it before God, and they brought it before God repetitively in a way that said, God, we don't know exactly how to handle this and we don't know exactly what to do, but we know that you do. Please work in us and work in our situation. A prayer that said, I have this that I'm struggling with and I have this that I'm dealing with, but God, I know that you're greater than that. And sometimes I think that we forget that the entire purpose behind us praying and the entire purpose behind us bringing our struggle before God is so that we can acknowledge we need Him. We acknowledge that we need Him before Him. Matthew chapter 6, verse 8 tells us that God knows what you need before you even pray it. And so we ask the question, well, then why am I praying? It's not to inform God. It's not to tell God what our struggle is. He already knows, but the point and the purpose is to talk to Him so that He knows that we know that we need Him. And so that He knows that we know that He can do great things in our situation if we'll just take it to Him and if we'll just turn over that struggle to Him instead of trying to hide it the way that we so often do. And this was the process that Zechariah and Elizabeth began to work through, and they didn't just stop here. They didn't just stop at praying about it, because I think that for the most part, we're pretty good about praying for the things that we struggle with, praying for the things that we deal with. But here is the next part. They sought opportunities to serve God, even though they weren't exactly sure what His plan was. And we even see that when He revealed the plan, that they were willing to follow through with it with the right incentive, the muteness. And looking at their lives, and looking at the way that they handled this very specific situation, I see that opportunity was everywhere, and blessings were everywhere and provided. The fact that he was able to become a priest, the fact that he was able to serve God in that capacity, that they were looking for ways. Verse 6 of chapter 1, talking about the way that they lived, righteous before God. They were looking for opportunities to give themselves to Him, looking for opportunities to serve Him. They didn't just say, okay, we have this barrenness, we have this struggle, we're going to sit and pray about it, and then we're going to wait. After we get done saying amen, we're going to sit right here and wait for God to fix it. They went out of that prayer and they took action. It reminds me of a discussion I was having one time, and we were looking at Hebrews 4 verse 16, where it says, "Draw before the throne of God with confidence." And the guy I was talking to said the confidence that we have when we draw before God in prayer doesn't start and stop when we pray. It doesn't start at the "Dear God" and end with the "Amen." The confidence that we have in God when we go in prayer comes after the prayer is over. Because you have the two farmers, both of them prayed for fields to grow. Both prayed for rain. One went and prepared his fields. The other just sat at home waiting. There's a stark difference between the two, and the stark difference in the belief in what God can do and what God can work in our situation based on the actions that we take the way Zechariah and Elizabeth did once we get through that prayer about our struggle. How much confidence do you and I have when it comes to our prayer life and when it comes to God dealing and working with our struggle and giving us opportunities? And when we look at all of this and when we bring all of this together, we're faced with a very large question of what we have been harboring and what we've been holding back from God and what we've been trying to keep under the rug or keep in the closet or keep a secret from Him. We know it's not a secret, but we try to treat it that way anyway. What is it that is the struggle for you? What is it that's the temptation or that is the stumbling block in your faith or whatever it is that stands between you and God this morning? And when we think about that, and we look at the story of Zacharias and Elizabeth, we come to a story that where God uses somebody's greatest struggle to become the way by which they serve Him most. And it reminds me of a gospel preacher one time. He went to a meeting, a gospel meeting, and they packed the house, and he had just this very convicting sermon, right? And when they offer the invitation, this one man comes forward, and he's in pieces. He's broken, he's crying, he's got his face in his hands. He can hardly get control of himself. And the preacher comes and brings him to the front row and tries to settle him down. And the man can't hardly get out words. And I'm not trying to make light of this. I'm not trying to make fun of this. But here's how he sounded. He said, "Preacher, I feel so bad." And in that same voice, in that same way, he proceeds to tell the preacher that he has been holding back from telling other people about Jesus because of his speech impediment that he's had since birth. And as he goes on, he talks about all the opportunities that he's been given. He talks about all of the ways that God has tried to open these doors for him, and all the times that he's prayed about it. And he said, I've never been able to follow through with it. And the preacher got up and they said a prayer for him, and he talked to him afterwards, and he drove all the way back home to go and get a box of old Jewel Miller film strips. I don't know. I've never seen them before. I've just heard about them. I don't know if y'all have ever heard them before. I know they're very old school. But they're these evangelism strips where you put them in the little projector and you would work through them with people. And so he went and he got this old projector and these old film strips, and he brought them to the man and he gave them to him. And after that gospel meeting was over, he didn't see him again until about a year later. And he was doing another gospel meeting at another church about 20 minutes away. And he had this sense of deja vu, because as soon as the invitation happened, this man began to come forward again, crying and sobbing in the exact same way. And he sat him down, and the preacher knew that the man had that momentary conviction, and then the flame had died out, right? He had this moment of, I'm going to do something and I'm going to make a difference, and then he had been given the tools to do it, and he went out and it fizzled. He was corrected when he looked at the man, and the man said, "Preacher, I'm so sorry. I failed." Oh, man, forgot. When he left the first time, he told the preacher, I'm going to get 10. I'm going to get 10 disciples. And when he came back the second time, he's sitting here and he's in the middle of sobbing, and he said, I only got 6. And the preacher's just kicked back on his heels. He doesn't know what to do, because anybody else would assume that he didn't follow through with what he said he was going to, but instead the man had taken what he had been given, and despite the thing that he struggled with, and despite the thing that he had wrestled with most, he went out and made a difference for God's kingdom, and he let God work through the very thing that he thought was his greatest struggle, and he used it for God's glory. So I'll ask you this morning, what is it that you're struggling with? And is there anything that we can do for you? Is there anything that you need to do right now, whether it be prayers or whether it be baptism, to allow God to take that struggle and use it to do great things? If you have any need, whether it be prayers or whether it be baptism, please make it known as together we stand and as we sing.